Thank you for joining us for the final week of the message series titled Fear Tactics, where we'll be talking about the end that is near. So if you have your Bibles, make sure and take them out. Otherwise, you can follow along on the YouVersion app on your smartphone or other electronic device. Once you're on the app, you can click on the More tab, then Events, and Epicenter will pop up if your location is turned on. If not, just type Epicenter Church and it'll pop up. You can follow along with the notes, with the points, and the verses. Just a reminder, we don't have nursery or children's church throughout the summer.
Did Dad tell you about my game?
Are you kidding me? You're all we talked about. He said that you were the greatest baseball player in the whole world. And you know what?
What?
He's right.
I love you.
Yes, you, buddy.
Please sit down. Have you seen her? I don't know what she is. Damn. Let's tell
Chris, let me in! Chris. We'll find out what's going on. Who's coming with? I want to see the captain! Hey, I want to see the captain! Open this door now! Yeah, no!
Attention, this is the captain.
This is the captain.
All passengers take your seats immediately. We're experiencing a decompression. Return to your seats and put on your oxygen masks. This is Pancon 257. We have an emergency. This is Pancon 257. We have an emergency. Drop the pressure and get them to sit. It's okay now. Everyone on this plane is scared to death. I really need you to step up your head. Can you do that?
Yeah.
I'm going to say something to the passengers. Watch the flight time. Hello, I'm Captain Steele. I need you to remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened, but you can now remove your oxygen masks.
What's going on?
My kid! Where are my kids?
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to
Left Behind movies. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them. Maybe you're more familiar with the older Left Behind movies, or maybe you're familiar with that new one. But maybe you're watching that clip and you're trying to figure out what in the world is taking place, why we're showing freaky movies at the church. But let me explain. At times we come to the church and, we gather together and we'll have people that are newer to their faith. They don't understand some of the things that we talk about on a weekly basis just because they're coming into their faith. And for them, we're tackling foreign concepts, trying to figure out where we're at. People new to their faith will come into the church and they will feel like they just walked into the middle of an episode of Days of Our Lives, what happened last week, So it's really hard because the rest of this message, you're trying to find context clues to know what happened. So if you're unfamiliar with that clip, let me explain what it's about. Growing up in the church for me, and maybe even for some of you, this might be similar or familiar to you as it terrified me. This image always terrified me when I was growing up in the church about an unknown time when Jesus would be coming back again and his followers would be taken to heaven. The only thing that would be left behind is a lot of clothes all over the seats, because that means that you experience what is known as the rapture. That moment when Jesus' followers will be taken to heaven and the world will enter into a terrible time like it has never been seen before. The people that don't know Christ are the ones that are going to remain behind, according to some studies. The movie gives a depiction of that time. So the goal is to have your clothes left behind, because that means that you actually went to heaven. But the Bible actually talks a lot about this topic, and even though you can't find that the clothes are left behind, it's just more so making an assumption since that's a material. But the Bible talks a lot about this topic, and it's known as eschatology. So eschatology simply means the theology regarding the final events, end times, and the end of the world. That's what eschatology means. There are different views in eschatology, and they have different views as to what it's going to look like, when this is going to take place. The video depicted showed some of those ideas, some of those views, but some of the views actually completely oppose what you just saw in the movie. And then there are other views in eschatology where they believe that the events described by Jesus already took place and they have already been fulfilled. There's nothing left. So there's different views in eschatology. So today we're going to be diving into this topic of eschatology. And regardless of where you stand on this, understand that I hope that we can agree on one thing, and that is that Jesus is coming back. And interestingly enough, Christianity is not the only religion or faith that believes that Jesus is coming back. Islam, which is a pagan religion, does not worship the same God, even though the argument has been made that they worship the same God as the Christian Judeo faith, or Judeo-Christian faith. But they also believe that Jesus is coming back, believe it or not. Even though they don't regard Jesus as one with God or as the Son of God, they view him as a good teacher. And they, according to the teachings, they believe that he is coming back and he will rule for a time. I believe, if I'm not taking this out of context, I believe it's about 40 years that he's going to live on earth, according to them. And then he will die and he will be buried in Medina next to the prophet Muhammad, according to them. They actually have a tomb reserved for Jesus. So, church, I share this not because I'm looking to other religions to add validity to what I know to be true, but to let it sink in that even pagan religions believe that Jesus is coming back. Even though they have the wrong idea of who Jesus is, they understand that Jesus is coming back. And Jesus, God in the flesh, tells us that not only is he coming back, but he actually gives us a revelation of what it's going to look like right to the time that he comes back. So if you have your Bibles, or if you're following along on the YouVersion app, turn with me to the book of Matthew, chapter 24. If you're following on the YouVersion app, it will actually be in sequential order. But this is a topic that we have talked about in the past. You know, this passage that we're going to tackle today. But I believe that now more than ever, it's relevant. Just because as soon as things get bad in the world, everybody's just kind of like trying to figure out when is Jesus coming back, or maybe it's right now. So we are either consumed by fear, or it's just something that we don't fully understand, and we sometimes say things that we really can't back up. When I was growing up, I remember, I had a lot of family in the church, and they would talk about these events that were going on around the world, and they would talk about the time that Jesus was coming back. And I was so terrified because I didn't want to be stuck in an airplane where the pilot went to heaven and I'm going down. So I remember asking Jesus into my life like 100 times. Realistically, I met the quota for the pastor, for salvations within the church. But, I was just so terrified by this. I don't want to stay behind. I don't want to deal with the aftermath of what's going to happen and what Jesus is describing. So for me, it terrified me, especially when you read what Jesus describes. So once again, Matthew chapter 24, verses 4 through 9 says this. Jesus told them, "Don't let anyone mislead you. For many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am the Messiah.' They will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, not might take place, must take place, but the end won't follow immediately." So it's just a beginning. Nation will go to war against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all this is only the first of the birth pains. We're just getting started with more to come. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers. So a pretty intense time to live in that Jesus is describing. The book of Revelation actually gives us more details as to how these events are going to unfold and what they're going to look like. We're not going to touch on that today. We're going to stick on Matthew, in the account in Matthew by Jesus. But Jesus describes this is going to be a terrible time. And, there's going to be people that are going to come and they're going to say, I'm the Messiah. So a quick search on the history of people who have claimed to be the Jewish Christian Messiah will bring a lengthy list. There's a lot of people that have claimed to be the Messiah throughout history. And many have been deceived. Wars, rumors, and threats of war, that's something that we've experienced. As a matter of fact, you don't have to look very far back. Just a few months ago, I remember seeing, a number of months ago now, but I remember seeing memes and different posts about World War III and how it was just around the corner. It was getting started any day now. So rumors of war, they're there. And once again, Jesus is saying these things must take place. Not might, they have to take place. These are the beginning symptoms of Jesus' return. And then he says, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. We've experienced this. We've actually seen this take place. The entire world armed up to fight a war. It happened 2 times, World War I, World War II, and now there was talks about World War III. Famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world, we see this, you'll hear about them all over the place. And Jesus is saying, this is just the beginning. This is the first of birth pains. If you have children or know somebody that has children, you understand that it intensifies as it progresses. Before everything comes to be, before the child comes to be, it intensifies more and more. Christians will be arrested, they will be persecuted and killed. This is also taking place around the world. Now, we might play blind to it and we just say that doesn't really happen. I've heard some horror stories of different missionaries or different pastors in different areas of the world where they have experienced persecution, actual persecution. Not the cold shoulder like we get in the U.S. that we so much despise. We're talking death for what they believe in. This happens around the world. And there will be followers of Jesus who will be hated all over the world because they stand for him. And this we can begin to understand. People don't necessarily like us for what we believe, depending on how firm you stand on Jesus' words. If Jesus' words are kind of fluid, then realistically you're probably fine. Nobody's going to say anything about that. But if you stand firm on Jesus' words, even though we would love to believe that Jesus' words are easy to accept, they're very hard to live out. Jesus is talking about a very bad time that in the history and that will ever be in the world. Now, just a few verses down, though, just to clarify, Jesus actually says how bad this time is going to be. Verse 21 says this, "For there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again." Let that sink in. Out of any time in history, this is going to be the worst time ever. There's never, ever going to be a time like it, and there has never been a time like it. That's how bad it has to get. And then Jesus says, in fact, unless a time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive. That's how bad it's supposed to get. But it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. So this is even something that is part of eschatology. Will we be taken up? Will we be raptured before all these events happen? And I just don't see it there. We're going to be around. This period of time will be the worst that there has ever been in the history of the world and that there will ever be. It will be so bad that if it wasn't cut short, complete annihilation would take place. There would be nobody that could survive this. But it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. Now, this is a significant topic within the church because ever since I can remember, I being within the church, I remember hearing, that Christ's return, Jesus is coming like tomorrow, or, just maybe within the next hour. That's how it felt anyways. And I almost felt like we were the people in the church, that were holding the poster boards in the corner street, and, the end is near written on it. That's how I felt. And at times, people in the church will look at natural catastrophes, human atrocities, and they will add to that to justify their claim that Jesus is just right around the corner. And I remember prior to having internet at our house, once I moved up to Minnesota, my wife and I would actually sit at home and watch over-the-air television, PBS, whatever came in. But I think it was Fox, right around midnight, I think it was, there was a televangelist that would come on by the name of Jack Van Impe. And he would always terrify me. But he would grab like newspaper article after newspaper article, and of all events that would take place around the world. And he would say, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And he would say, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And you would feel like, man, I better tell my kids bye, just in case they weren't ready. But here's the thing, I remember being terrified. And I would turn off the TV and I would try to go to sleep, but all these things are just going through my mind thinking, I don't think I'm going to live till tomorrow. I think Jesus is coming back today. But, it would just terrify me. It would create fear. Growing up within the church, I would hear so much about this that I would respond out of fear. That's the reason that I accepted Jesus like 100 times, because I was fearful of this. And especially, once again, when you read the account of what Jesus says, it's a horrible time to live in. So there's no doubt that we don't want to be here for that. But church, at times, this is what begins to happen. At times, we are so convinced of the unknown that we live trying to convince people of the uncertainty rather than what we are confident in. Let me break that apart. Sometimes we are so convinced of something we really don't know. We're saying Jesus is coming back tomorrow. That's what we're trying to convince people of. That's an uncertainty. We have no idea. Rather than being confident and telling people what we know for sure. Jesus is coming back and you better be ready. That is something that I'm confident in. And Jesus does give us this information to serve as signs of what is coming. But church, we should be living with an understanding of what Scripture says, and we should be vigilant. For sure, knowing what is taking place in the world. But at times we're so easy at creating panic in people, never considering that our word may be losing credibility with every single word that we say. And don't get me wrong, things are really bad right now. I get that. But if you look back at history, it was bad back then too. Go back to World War II. If I would have been living in that time frame, I'm telling you, I would have been convinced that Jesus was coming back then. Why? Because there was a madman, a lunatic, an evil person that was killing millions of Jews, that was trying to create a perfect race through eugenics and trying to rise to superpower in the world. I would have been convinced that Jesus was coming at that time. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, right? I would have been convinced. This is it. If I would have been convinced and I would have said something, not only would I have been wrong, but I would have, every single time that I keep on saying that, my word loses value because I'm talking about something that I'm uncertain of rather than something that I am confident in. Once again, we look at history and you could see that many people have claimed to be the Messiah, but we also see in history that there has been many people, and even in the future tense, there are many people that have claimed dates of when Jesus is coming back. According to Wikipedia, these are some of the dates that were predicted by individuals just a few years after I was born. So I was born in 1984. So I'm going to start from there. I don't have time to continue to go all the way back then. But there are a number of claims that have started. So starting in the year 1988, 4 years after I was born, and I'm probably going to butcher some of the names. I'm better with Spanish last names than English. But Edgar C. Weisnant published a book, 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Happen in 1988. When this didn't happen, he wrote the follow-up book entitled 89 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Happen in 1989. Harold Camping, he predicted that in September 6, 1994, Jesus would return. Jerry Falwell predicted in 1999 that the second coming would probably be within 10 years. Even if you put 10 years, that only puts you at 2009. We've passed that year a number of years ago now. Ed Dobson, Timothy Dwight IV, Edgar Cayce, and Isaac Newton had predictions regarding Christ's return or the start of Christ's millennium in the year 2000. That's already happened. It's crazy, 20 years ago. James Harmston, April 6, 2000. Harold Camping, again, March 21st of 2011 and October 21st of 2011. Neither one of those came to pass. Ronald Wainwright predicted Jesus would return on the 29th of December of 2011, more than likely because of the Twin Towers collapse. When his prediction failed to come true, he moved the date of Jesus' return to the 27th of May of 2012. When that prediction failed, he then again moved the date to the 18th of May 2013, claiming that a day with God is a year. Is this a year? Giving himself another year for his prophecy to take place. Jack Van Impe, I talked about him, pointed to 2012 as a possible date for the second coming. Mark Biltz began preaching that Christ's return would correspond with the 28th of September in 2015 lunar eclipse. His idea, known as the blood moon prophecy, attracted attention from Pastor John Hagee, who stopped short of claiming Christ's return would be on that precise date. Ronald Wainwright, again, believed that Jesus Christ would return on Pentecost in 2019. 7 more future dates are actually listed on the Wikipedia page of dates that have been thrown out by people in regards to Christ's return. Here's the thing. It is always difficult and painful to hear some of these dates because the Bible is clear on the subject. Matthew 24, verse 36, Jesus says this, "However, no one knows the date or the hour when these things will happen. Not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself, only the Father knows." No one knows. I don't know. Can I just say, like, super blunt? It's embarrassing. We shouldn't be trying to figure this out. We should just live ready. The signs may actually start to fit better. Once again, like I said, World War II, I would have been convinced. But the hour is not known. Once again, remember, things will progressively start to get worse. Epicenter, I know that one thing for sure. I am confident that he is coming back. I am confident of that. You can't rock my boat on that. I want to live my life convincing people of that truth rather than convincing people of something that I don't know. Don't stake your word on the uncertainty. Stand firm on the certainty that Jesus is coming back. In the first letter to the people of Thessalonica, Paul writes this, "Now concerning how and when all this will happen, dear brothers and sisters, we don't really need to write you." Why? He actually says it. "For you know quite well that the day of the Lord's return will come unexpectedly." You have no idea. Like a thief in the night. You know, a thief isn't going to come when you're expecting him. He's going to come when you least expect him. When people are saying, now listen carefully, everything is peaceful and secure, then disaster will fall on them suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pain begins, and there will be no escape. I have 5 kids. It just comes on. We've tried everything to speed it up. You can't. It's going to happen when it's going to happen. And then there's no escaping it. You should know this. Do you catch the part? It's going to be peaceful and secure. Everything is fine. Everything is good. And then disaster will strike. Once again, there's signs leading up to it, but superficially, everything looks good. The labor pains, like Jesus was talking about, suddenly begins. The saddest part about this, though, is we're going to go back to Matthew chapter 24. And in verse 10, Jesus is something that is pretty saddening. Jesus talks about the wars and the rumors of wars, being hated on account of him. But in verse 10, he says this, "And many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other." That, to me, that's the saddest part. Many will fall away. Many will lose hope. Many will be done. They're done. Many people that claim to follow Jesus, and there's many, right? It's just a title. They will fall away of the faith that they claimed and will betray and they will hate each other. When there is a waiting process, when things get tough, the tendency is to let go of the things that we're unsure of. I'm not entirely sure, so I'm just going to let go of this. With everything that is happening in the world today, there are many uncertainties in what lies ahead. But in the midst of uncertainty, what can begin to happen is that people will hold on to some things and let go of others. Sadly enough, even as a church, we're seeing that. People let go of the things that, it was just an extra thing for the week. You begin to let go of things and you hold on tighter to others. And at times, the way that this is determined is by holding tightly to what we're sure of and let go of what we're never truly grounded in. Whatever I'm grounded in, that's what I'm going to hold on to because I believe in it. I will die for it. I will do anything for it. Whatever I'm unsure of, I'm going to let it go. It's not worth my time. It's not worth my efforts. It's not worth my life. This last week, I heard an incredible quote that was stated by Sean McDowell, an apologist, but it was made by his dad. Now, to give the quote a little bit of context, this is what was taking place. So, Sean McDowell was speaking to a Christian artist who claimed, or an ex-Christian artist that claimed to have lost his faith recently. And the Christian artist was talking about how he experienced something so significant in his life that it emotionally wrecked him. And he was just saying, I don't know how to reconcile that. So Sean McDowell was telling him, they were talking about your feelings are good. I think that even in worship, we experience God emotionally. But right now, we're understanding God with our mind. We're understanding the character of God. And sometimes both of them don't coincide. Emotionally, we understand God, but then there's parts that emotionally it wrecks us and we disconnect God from that. So I love the quote that Sean McDowell's dad said, and it's this: guard your heart with your mind, not your mind with your heart. Let that sink in. I love that. Guard your emotions with what you know. Don't let your emotions control what you know to be true. The emotions are deceitful. In life, there will be things that will emotionally wreck us. If you've ever given your heart away, if you've ever been invested in your heart in something, and when it is wrecked, it wrecks you completely, even from what you know. When bad things happen, like what we're experiencing right now, once again, emotionally we can be wrecked that we forget who God is, and we let go. It's done. Many will fall away from their faith when things get difficult. And I think that, in a way, the church is to blame in this. I think we've created faith that is so based on emotion rather than the true character of God. We've romanticized what faith is. You're going to deal with difficulties, but it doesn't take away from the character of God. The way that you hold on to your faith is by grounding yourself in what you know, rather than what you're feeling or experiencing. I don't know when Jesus is coming back, but I know that things have to get really bad before they get any better. And here's the thing. It may happen in my lifetime. It may not. But I'm not giving up hope, and I'm standing grounded on the fact that Jesus is coming back. I can ground myself on that truth. But at times we begin to question, and this is one that I really wanted to tackle today, this issue, just because at times there's these doubts that creep into our heads, and we see examples of this in the Bible, from Peter to Thomas, right? They doubted. But you know, one of the passages that really came to mind for this message was John the Baptist. And it's really interesting. So John the Baptist baptizes Jesus, and in chapter 1, verse 29, it says, "The next day, John the Baptist saw Jesus coming towards him and said, 'Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.'" John's recognizing, this is who we've been waiting for. This is it. He is the one I was talking about when I said, a man is coming after me who is far greater than I am, for he existed long ago. He is one with God. John the Baptist recognized Jesus as the Messiah. But now I want to give some context before I go to the next passage. If you're familiar with John the Baptist, and even if you're not, let me tell you, John the Baptist's life was not easy. He got beheaded at the end. That's how his life ends. But even at that, John the Baptist is saying he is the Messiah. He's the one that we've been waiting for. And during Jesus' time, not everybody agreed that he was a Messiah. And even now, the Pharisees, Sadducees, they disagreed. He's not the Messiah. It would be disheartening, right, to believe something that not everybody accepts. So he's in prison, and with all these things in mind, he's about to get beheaded. He's in prison. People aren't necessarily accepting that truth that Jesus is the Messiah. All of a sudden, there's this contrast, this conflict. In Matthew chapter 11, verses 2 through 6, it says that John the Baptist, who was in prison, once again, he's facing difficulty, heard about all the things the Messiah was doing. So he sent his disciples to ask Jesus, and here's the question: are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for someone else? What happened? When things get difficult, we may begin to question. Jesus responds back to him, to the disciples, go back to John and tell him what you have heard and seen. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor. And tell him, God blesses those who do not turn away because of me. He's reassuring him, I'm it. Here are all the signs that you were looking for. During difficult times, it may be hard to hold on to Jesus, but don't let go. Even when doubt begins to creep in and you feel like, my goodness, we've been waiting forever. What's taking him so long? Keep holding on. At times it will be discouraging, as it feels like every single generation has almost like just been anticipating it. And there may even be some verses that we begin to struggle with that sounds like maybe, this should have already happened like 3 generations ago or 2 generations ago, whatever it is. And I remember actually coming across this passage, or even thinking about this passage, and being a difficult one, because it almost seems to contradict itself. Verse 32 of Matthew chapter 24 says this: "Now learn a lesson from the fig tree. When its branches bud and its leaves begin to sprout, you know that summer is near." Once again, Jesus is saying, there's the signs. You're looking for these things. In the same way, when you see all these things, you can know his return is very near, right at the door. He's saying, when all these things are happening, know that it's right around the corner. I tell you the truth, this is a passage that I struggle with a little bit. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass from the scene until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will disappear, but my words will never disappear. And here's the reason why. The generation as to the one that Jesus was speaking to, it's past, it's gone. And this didn't take place. Jesus is coming soon, right? We just keep on saying that. Now, there's different views as to what this means. Some people believe that some events happened in the past and some events are still waiting to be fulfilled as we look at history. But the issue is that Jesus doesn't say some events are going to happen and then some other ones are going to happen. He's saying this generation will not pass before all these events take place. So church, here's the other view, and I believe this to be true. I believe that what Jesus is saying is all the things that he's describing will happen within one single generation. And that generation will not pass away before all these things are fulfilled. It's going to happen within one generation, and it will happen quickly. It's going to progress. It is not an event that failed to pass multiple generations. It is a generation that will come to pass in a single generation. And when it happens, Jesus describes it this way. When the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up to the time Noah entered his boat. Everybody could care less. I'm just going to do my thing. You do your thing. You believe what you want. I believe what I want to do. People didn't realize what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them away like a thief in the night. That is the way that it will come, or that it will be when the Son of Man comes. Two men will be working together in the field. One will be taken, the other left. That's a video that we saw in the opening. Two women will be grinding flour at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. Church, people are going to be going about their business, ignoring the fact that Jesus is coming. But 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 4, it says this. Church, but you aren't in the dark about these things, dear brothers and sisters, and you won't be surprised when the day of the Lord comes like a thief. You'll know. For you are all children of the light and of the day. We don't belong to the darkness and the night. So be on your guard, not asleep like the others. Stay alert and be clear-headed. Night is when people sleep and drinkers get drunk. But let us who live in the light be clear-headed, protected by the armor of faith and love, and wearing as our helmet the confidence of our salvation. Be on guard, not asleep. Stay alert, be clear-headed, not fearful. It's the opposite of all that, right? Placing our hope and our confidence and salvation on Jesus as we live to honor him. Church, growing up within the church, this topic terrified me, especially if this would be what would be happening around me right now. But I want to encourage you today that if you are in Christ, this is not a topic that should cause us to live in fear, but should cause us to be alert. We should always be ready. I think the reason that we're fearful is because we understand that we're not really living for Jesus. I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, I'm just being completely honest. I was like, I would just live for the world to the last possible second, and then I'll give my life to Jesus. I want to do what I want to do, and then the last minute I want to be with Jesus. We should always be ready, in and out of season. It's not a matter of fear. It's a matter of being alert and being ready. Jesus is coming back. And I'll be very honest, I do believe that with everything that is happening, we are living in a different time than we've ever lived in. And I really want to believe that Jesus' return is coming soon. But that's not what I want you to hear. I want you to hear what I am confident in, and that is that Jesus is coming back. At some point, he will come back. And it will be when people least expect it. So be alert. Whether it's today, tomorrow, years from now, our generation, generations to come, it's irrelevant. Be ready.